the webcam. There we go. All right. Well, welcome or good morning to everyone in California, and good afternoon to everyone everywhere else. And welcome to the first November show of Build Something Awesome. Today, we're going to be doing a game that I enjoyed from my childhood. It's an old DOS game called Bouncing Babies, where babies are thrown out of a burning building and firemen bounce them to safety. So, I don't think there's much more of an intro I need to do today. Let's just get started. The first thing I wanted to talk about was kind of our plan of action, or like a game plan. Once you start to get more familiar with some of the programming patterns and are creating new stuff on your own, you can kind of do things in whatever order you want. But I'm trying to stick to a specific pattern on this broadcast, or on all the Build Something Awesome videos, so that anybody who's new can kind of learn the same steps to get something going, especially if you're designing a new game. So the steps we're going to be going through today are the same ones we've used in the previous games, which is first we're going to get our window up and draw everything we need for the game. Then start using some variables to make things move around on the screen. Then we can hook up our mouse and keyboard listeners to actually move things based on user input. And then we can add sounds and make things more complicated, put better graphics in and all that. So let's start with explaining or designing what our game is going to be today. And I've got a new webcam. Let's see if this works. All right, so here is my blank note card. This is going to be my game screen. Again, I'm going to use a screen that's 800 pixels by 600 pixels wide, just because it's kind of a nice, easy size to remember. And let's draw out what we're going to have this look like. So, the basics for the game are we've got some ground. There's a burning building here with some flames. And there are babies, I'll just draw it as a square, that are going to fall out the window and bounce and land in the ambulance over here. And then the key part is the firemen. I'll draw them right here, and they've got a trampoline that the babies are going to bounce off of. So that's kind of the wireframe of our game, and I'm going to go ahead and just kind of estimate some sizes, because we're going to want some numbers to lay things out on our screen. And let's just start making kind of some estimates. We've got our baby here. Let's say he's 25 pixels by 25 pixels. And then we've got our building. Let's say that's 60 pixels from the top of the screen. And then how wide? Let's say it's 60 pixels wide. And then we're going to have some flames. So let's say the flames are 50 by 50. And then we've got the ground at the bottom. Let's make that 40 pixels tall. And then we've got our ambulance. Let's say that's kind of rectangular, like 120 by 100 pixels. And we've got the firemen, which are kind of a unit together. So let's say that's 140 pixels wide, and the firemen are each 60 pixels tall. So that'll be kind of our outline, and all these numbers will help us write our program faster, because we won't have to kind of guess and run the program and decide what to change and then run it again. So if we kind of estimate numbers in advance, we can just stick those in and we'll be a lot closer the first time we write stuff. And if you're doing this for the first time, you might want to kind of draw things out on graph paper. so that you can estimate more easily. But once you start doing this for a while, you'll kind of get the hang of estimating sizes. Alright, so now that we've got our wireframe, let's get started. Let's switch over to the computer, and we've got IntelliJ, which I've talked about installing in the past. I'm going to be putting a video up on the website that just shows the installation of IntelliJ. But if you don't have it, you can Google search for it and download it for free and install it. And, alright, this should be familiar to everyone who's watched previously. We're going to start a new project. Create a project from scratch. This game is called Bouncing Babies. And we're going to use a Maven module. Doesn't really matter if you use Java or Maven right now, but in future projects we're going to need Maven because it lets us pull in some other code that other people have written pretty easily. And then this window is just some Maven stuff. Doesn't matter, just hit finish. And here is our new project window. Alright, and our tip of the day: did you know to navigate to the declaration of a class, method, or variable, use somewhere in the code, position the caret at the usage, and press Command B. You may also click the mouse with Control. Okay, this is actually pretty useful. I can show you guys what this means when we're using it, but it's a kind of a trick to help you navigate through your code if you've got a lot of stuff in there. So, let's get started. Once again, our first thing to do is create a Java file, which we're going to put in Bouncing Babies, source, main, Java. And use Control-click or right-click on Windows. And say New Java Class. Bouncing Babies Game. We can't use spaces for class names in Java, so that's why we use... This is called camel case. We just capitalize every word and jam them all together. Here's our game. We're going to use the same pattern that we've used in our other games. We're going to say right here, extends JComponent. Oops, I forgot a space. And I've reset my IntelliJ, so it's as if I just installed it. So we've got a couple installation steps here still. JComponent is red, there's an error. So I'm going to use Alt-Enter, and it's telling me I need to set up JDK. So if you've already followed along with one of the previous videos, you'll already have the JDK set up. But if you don't, you've got to click this, click Configure, click this plus button way up here, JSDK, and on Mac, it'll have this home thing. Just click choose. But if you're on Windows, you've got to browse to Program Files /Java, and then there should be a folder called JDK with some number. So pick that if you're on Windows. If you're on Mac, just hit choose on home. And now it's set up this 1.7 SDK. You might have a different number, that's fine. Hit OK. OK. And there's still a problem. Hit Alt-Enter one more time, and we need to import the class JComponent, which adds this line up at the top that basically pulls in a bunch of predefined code that we can now reference. Alright, so we've got our JComponent. We're going to make our main method, which again is just some boilerplate code that you kind of need to remember or print out a cheat sheet of. Public static void main parentheses string square bracket args curly brace. And in here we've got our boilerplate code to create the window. JFrame window equals new JFrame, and we can give it a title here in quotes, Bouncing Babies, or let's say Save the Babies. Then we need to actually create a copy of our game, or an instance of our game. Bouncing Babies Game is the name of it, and we're creating a variable that's going to reserve some memory for the game to be stored in the computer while it's running. I'll just call this game equals new Bouncing Babies Game. And now we've got our boilerplate, window.add game, window.pack, window.set location relative to null, window.set default close operation, window constants dot exit on close, window.set visible true. Alright, it's a lot of stuff, but just stick it in there and it'll make your window pop up. Just real quick, pack makes the window resize itself so that the game fits inside. Set location relative to null just centers the window on the screen. Set default close operation is a little weird thing, but you need it to make sure that your Java program stops running when you close the game window. And then set visible to true just makes the window visible. Alright, so we don't have anything up in this run menu. Our play button is grayed out. So the first time we've got to right click on our Bouncing Babies game, or control click on Mac, and hit Run Bouncing Babies. And hopefully it will start up. There it is in the middle, and it's got our title. Alright, so that works. Let's do our next two steps, our last little pieces of boilerplate to get started. Do Control O or Command O on Mac to override a method. And there's two you've got to remember. The first one is get preferred size. So I can just type in this window and it'll jump down to where it is. Get preferred size. Okay, got it. And this code for this is return new dimension. 800 by 600 is what I chose for my window size. You can choose your own size if you want. And then the other one, Command O, paint component. And here is where we're going to draw all the stuff for our game. So, switch to my webcam for a second. So, when I drew out my little card here, this is kind of just, it's what's called a wireframe. And we use these a lot in software development. It just kind of shows a sketch and an outline of what's going to be there. So we're actually going to do the same thing in our program right now and just draw some colored rectangles to show where everything should be, and then we'll stick in the real graphics later on. So let's start by drawing the background. Let's make that just black. Color.black, G.fillRect 00 to put it in the top left corner, and it's going to be 800 pixels wide and 600 pixels tall. And that'll draw black across the whole screen. So let's try it. I'll hit run. And everything comes up. I've got my black window. Perfect. So let's draw some of this other stuff. First, we've got the ground, G.setColor, let's just make that white for now. Alright, let's make it white.darker, kind of a light gray. And then we've got to draw it, G.fillRect. The X position is 0, and the Y position is going to be from the top of the screen down to 400 above the bottom. So that's 600 minus 440. And then the width is going to be the width of the screen, and the height is going to be 40. Alright, and there's the gray ground. Let's draw the building. G.setColor. And I don't want one of the built-in colors. I'm going to use this trick in IntelliJ again to let me use the color picker. I'll say new color 0, 0, 0. And now it makes this little helper that I can just click and choose whatever color I want. Let's have kind of a brick red color for the building. And then we'll draw it. So, g.fillRect, and the building is on the left side of the screen, so its x position is 0. And it's almost at the top of the screen. I said on my drawing that it was going to be 60 pixels from the top, and then the width of the building is going to be 60, and the height of the building is going to be the screen minus, so the screen height is 600 minus 60, which is the extra space at the top, minus 40, which is the extra space at the bottom. Let's try that. Alright, there it is. Let's draw the ambulance. G.setColor, this will be white, color.white. G.fillRect, and let's see, I'm not sure what his X and Y are just yet, but I know he's going to be 120 wide and 100 pixels tall. So let's just put him somewhere and see where he shows up. Okay, he needs to go farther to the right. 500. Nope, even farther. 700. Oh, a little too far. Should actually be 680. Alright, there he is, and he needs to go farther down by about 60, 460. Okay, there's the ambulance. No room for wheels, but that'll be part of the image that we stick in later. Alright, finally we need the firemen. And there's going to be, let's see, g.setColor, new color 0, 0, 0. Let's maybe have like a blue color for the firemen. And g.fillRect. Alright, they kind of go in the middle of the screen. X is maybe 400, and Y, let's see, the ground is at 600 minus 40, and we want it to be above that. And the firemen are 60 pixels tall. So subtract 60. Let's see how that works. And let's see, there's going to be two firemen. Let's make them 30 pixels wide, and we said they were 60 tall. And then let's add the second one. He's going to be farther to the right, maybe at 500. Okay, let's make them a little farther apart. 550. Okay, that looks pretty good. And then we need the trampoline in between them. G.setColor, let's make this white. G.fillRect. Alright, so he's got to go from the first fireman, who's at 400. And this is the top of the fireman. And then let's add maybe 40 to that to make the trampoline be below the fireman's head. And then it's 5, let's see, so there's 150 pixels between the two firemen. So this will be 150 pixels wide and maybe 10 tall. Let's see how that looks. Pretty good, except it's too far to the left. It needs to kind of be between them. So let's move it farther to the right, maybe 20. Maybe a little bit less, 15. Okay, maybe a tiny bit higher. So we don't want it to go quite so low. 35 down. Okay, and the last thing we need is babies. So we'll just draw one for now. And let's make him kind of a yellow color. Maybe like that. And let's put him in the middle of the screen for now. 400, 300. And he is 25 by 25 pixels from our sketch earlier. Okay, that looks like a good size. All right, so we've got everything drawn that we want to. Our next step is to start making things move. But before we do that, one thing we want to do is just take a second to kind of clean up our code a little bit. The main problem we've got so far is there's all kinds of numbers in our paint component method, and it's kind of confusing to know what is what. So let's take a second here and clean stuff up. So we're going to use this command in the code. Nope, it's in the refactor method called extract variable. And we've used this in previous games. This basically lets us take anything in our program, but in this case we're going to take some numbers and basically give them a name, and it also gives us the ability later to change them while the program is running. So let's go through and see where it makes sense to create some variables. So we've got 800, 600. That's the width and height of the screen. So let's make variables for those because we're using them in a lot of places. 800, 800, here's 600, 600, 600. So whenever you see duplication like that, it's kind of a hint that maybe you can use a variable instead, so you don't have to keep typing the same number all the time. So I'm going to put my cursor here on 800 and use Command Option V, and on Windows I think it might be Control Option or Control Alt V, and it notices that there's some other 800s. Whoops, actually, I lied. We're going to use a different refactor. We're going to use a field instead of a variable. And the reason for that is that fields can be used throughout your whole program, whereas variables can only be used inside the method. So the method we're in is paint component. So I'm actually going to use Command Option F to make a field, and I'll call it game width. I'll do the same thing for 600, game height, and here you can see it's trying to set these in our paint component, but we want these to be set everywhere. So I'll just move the definition up here. Game width is 800, game height is 600, and now here in preferred size we can also use these same variables. Game width, game height. Alright, let's look at what else we have. Alright, here we've got a 600, that's game height. Here we've got a 800, that's game width. And this 40 is the height of the ground. So let's make a field for that. ground height. Whoops, I spelled it wrong. I can right click on it and say refactor, rename. Well, usually I can. Say refactor, rename. Whoops. The menu's not working. The shortcut key is Shift F6. Oh, that's not working either. Alright, let's just rename it manually. Ground height, ground height, ground height. And this is also the height. Here we've got the building. So 600 is the game height. 60, this first 60 is the space above the building, so we'll just leave that for now. And then this 60 is the width of the building. Let's make a variable for that. Building width. And again, let's move these definitions up to the top. So building width is 60. Ground height is 40. And that's kind of just a quick overview of doing that. We'll convert some of these others as we go to help make the code more readable. But to start with, let's make our babies move now. So here's our baby. He is being drawn at 400, 300, and his width is 25 and his height is 25. So in order for the baby to move, we're going to need to change his X and Y position. So we need to make fields for both of these things so that the program can update them. So 400 will become a field with, let's see, we can right click here and say refactor, extract field, and this is the baby X. I'm also going to choose this to say initialize it in the field declaration. That will make the setting of it to 400 be up here at the top. So we've got our baby X, and then we need another field for baby Y. So we can go to refactor, extract field, baby Y. And now we've got these variables. We can change these and the baby will be in a different position. So let's put him at 100, 100. Run the program. And here it comes. Alright, the baby's at 100, 100. So we can successfully control him with these variables. So now let's add the code to make things happen automatically. We are using a timer for this. So this is the pattern. We've got some stuff to add at the top. So for animations, it's implements action listener. I spelled implements wrong. Implements action listener. It's red, so let's use Alt-Enter. And now it's complaining that class Bouncing Babies game must either be declared abstract or implement methods. Okay, that's kind of confusing. Let's hit Alt-Enter and see what our choices are. We want to do implement methods, and here is the method that is needed for an action listener. Let's hit OK, and it adds it down here. So in here, we'll come back to this in just a second. Our final step to wire up the action listener is in our main method. At the end, we need to say timer t equals new timer. And and we tell it how often to run the timer. I'll say every 30 milliseconds, and we need to give it an action listener, which is our game. And then we say t.start. That'll run the timer and make this action perform method be called every 30 milliseconds. So in here, we're going to say baby x equals baby x plus 5, let's say. So he kind of moves to the right. There's an error here. So let's hit Alt-Enter. And it says make baby x not final. Yes, that's what we want. Final means that in Java that a variable never changes. So for some reason it thought baby x was supposed to never change, but that's not true. So we can accept that. Let's see, baby y equals baby y plus 10. And I think it's got the same thing. Let's use Alt-Enter. Make baby y not final. And then finally, whenever we use action performed, we need to say repaint at the end. So let's try it. There it is. Oh, and there's the baby flying. So, one problem we have is the baby is just kind of floating across the screen. We want to make him move the way that gravity would make a baby move. So, to do that, we use kind of a physics equation where his position is going to change by his speed. So instead of always moving him by 10, we'll move him by the baby y speed. We need to make a new field for that with Alt-Enter. And it'll start being 0. And then the way gravity works is it increases your speed over time. It's a force that accelerates things. So we'll say baby y speed equals baby y speed plus gravity. And I'll use Alt-Enter to make gravity a field. And let's say gravity is 1 pixel per frame. So let's see how this looks. That looked a lot better. He kind of fell out the window as if gravity were pulling him. Okay. And the final thing is let's make him bounce when he gets to the ground. So we'll say if baby y is less than or equal to the ground y, which we haven't calculated yet, but we can make that. Then we're going to flip his speed to go in the opposite direction. Baby y speed equals negative baby y speed. Now, let's fix this ground y. We'll make a field for it, and we'll say ground y equals the game height minus the ground height, which is what it is. All right, let's run it. Whoops. That baby's like a flying pig. My if statement is backwards. His y position is always going to be less than the ground position. We want to say if he goes greater than the ground position. Let's try that again. There we go. And now he's bouncing. Oh yeah, so let's make it so he doesn't bounce the same height every time. He's kind of going to lose some bounce due to friction. So we'll use another physics equation for that. So rather than just flipping his speed, which is -1 times his old speed, we're going to make this slightly less. So let's say like 0.9 or 0.8 times his speed. And now here's a problem in Java. Our variables were integers, which means they can't have decimal points. But now that we're multiplying by this decimal point, we can have decimal points. So let's use Alt-Enter and fix this. And we want to change the y speed to be a double, which means it's a variable that can have decimal places now. And then you can see the same thing is kind of infecting everywhere. We're going to need to make his y position be a double. And then up here, we've got a problem where we need to draw the rectangle. And here, we only have one choice. We need to cast, which in Java that just means convert it. So we're going to convert the double, which has decimal places, to an integer, which doesn't. So it's just going to chop them off when it draws. But we need those decimal places for calculating everything accurately. Alright, let's try now and see if he kind of damps his bounce every time. Whee! Okay, and he went right to the ambulance. Looks pretty good. Okay, so obviously the problem we have at the moment is that he's bouncing off the ground. We only want him to bounce off the trampoline, but we'll come back to that in a minute. First, we want to make the firemen move. So, again, let's look at where the firemen are. Right here. And his X position is 400. His Y position is this big thing, which 600 we can change to be game height. And same thing here. That's one of our variables now. And actually 40, that is the ground height. Okay, so 400 is what we want to change when we type things on the keyboard. So let's make a field for that. Use refactor, extract field. This is the fireman X position, and we'll initialize it in the field declaration. Now, we need our code to change the fireman X variable whenever we type keys on the keyboard. So first, we need to go up here to our implements, and we need to add another implements, which is key listener. And here we'll use Alt-Enter again to implement the methods. And we need all three of these. The one we're going to use is key pressed. So I'm just going to delete these comments it added for us. And we're going to use key pressed. The reason we need to use key pressed instead of key typed is because we're going to be using the arrow keys, and Java doesn't send arrow keys to the key typed. It only sends them in the key pressed. And you can use key pressed for any other key on the keyboard, so use key pressed, it'll work. Alright, so what we want to do here is let's test this way. Fireman X equals fireman X plus 10, and then we will repaint. And there's a problem here. It says it's final, so let's use Alt-Enter and make fireman X not final. And then we also have to connect the key listener. Thank you, chat room. For some reason, my key combinations are getting slower and slower. There we go. Okay. So, here's what I added while you were looking at my face. I added this key listener, implements, at the top. And then I used Alt-Enter to let IntelliJ help me create the methods. And it created these three down here: key typed, key pressed, and key released. And then here's my code in key pressed. Every time we press a key, the fireman is going to move by 10 pixels, and then we repaint the screen. And the last step is in our main method, here where we did our thing with the timer. We also need to do something for key listener. We say game.add key listener game. And let's try running it. We should see the fireman move when we type a key. It's loading caches. Make. All right. I think I made a mistake. This should be window.add key listener game. There he is. So the one fireman is moving. Got a couple problems. First of all, the other fireman and the trampoline need to move with him. So let's do that. Okay, so here's the second fireman. He is 550, which was... We've got to write this in terms of the first fireman's position. So that was... The first fireman starts at 400. So this is the first fireman's position plus 150. And then the trampoline, the same thing. This is 415, so that's the first fireman's position plus 15 pixels. All right, let's try that. All right, everything's moving together. Now, the other thing is, this is not how we want the keys to work. First of all, any key will do the same thing, so let's fix that. And the way I'm going to have the keyboard work in my game is if you hit the left button, the firemen will move to position 1 on the left side. If you press down, they'll move to position 2, and if you press right, they'll move to position 3. So a little different than other games where left moves to the left and right moves to the right. I'm just going to have each key correspond to a set location. But you can do it the other way in your game if you want to. The important part is we need an if statement, and we need to check which key got pressed on the keyboard. And the way we do that is we can use this key event thing here. It's called E. So we'll say e.getKeyCode is a number that corresponds to individual keys. We'll say if the key code equals keyEvent.vk left is the left key, then fireman X should equal, let's say, 100. And if e.getKeyCode equals, with a double equals when we compare, keyEvent.vk down, then fireman X equals 250 maybe. And finally, if we press the right arrow key. So that's e.get key code equals keyEvent.vk_write fireman x equals 400. And then this old thing I can delete. Let's see how that works. So there's the left key, down key, and the right key. Let's make them each move a little bit farther. But overall, that's pretty good. Let's make this 270, and this one will be 440. Alright, so there are the 3 positions for my fireman. Looks pretty good. Alright, so our next part is to make the baby only bounce when he hits the trampoline. And if he doesn't hit the trampoline, that's when things get bad. He's just going to splat on the ground. So we need to do something for that also. But first, let's make another baby get thrown out the window when the first baby goes off the screen. So that's an easy thing to do. Here's our action performed, where we're updating the baby on every tick of the timer. We'll say if baby x is greater than the width of the whole game, then let's reset his position and his speed. We'll say baby x equals 50, baby y equals 100, baby y speed equals 0. So that should reset him back to where the window is. And also, let's make this be the position he starts at the beginning. So 50 for x and 100 for y. Baby x should be 50 and 100 for y. And his y speed starts at 0. Okay, let's try it again. Boing, boing. Okay, that looks pretty good. So now we've got an endless supply of babies from the building. One thing I'm noticing is he's bouncing too far down. Let's take a look at the bouncing if statement. In action performed, we're saying if the baby's y position is greater than the ground's y position. So this doesn't account for the baby's height. So let's say if his y plus his height, which we know is 25, that should make him actually bounce off of the ground rather than having the top of him bounce off the ground. Okay, that looks better. Alright, so our next part is we need the baby only to bounce if the firemen are underneath him. So here, this is checking if he's close to the ground. We could do this some different ways. I'm going to do this by having an if statement inside of my if statement. So this outside one is going to be check if the baby is near the ground. And then inside, we're going to check if the trampoline is under the baby. We'll say if, and we need to check his x and y positions. And I'm going to put up a blog post about kind of an explanation for how this works. But basically, we're going to be checking the left side and the right side of each thing. So first we want to check if the baby's X position plus his width, which is 25, is greater than or equal to the fireman's X position, and the fireman's X position plus the fireman's width, which I think was 150, is greater than or equal to the baby's X position. So that'll make sure that the baby is in between the left and right side of the fireman. So if we do that, if he's on the trampoline, then he'll bounce. Let's see if I did that right, first of all. Yes, the baby missed the trampoline. Let's put the trampoline underneath and see if he bounces. Yes, he does. Whoops. But I couldn't. There we go. He needs to bounce a little slower. So he's moving too fast to the right. Let's change this to 4 and see if he hits the trampoline positions a little better. Bounce, bounce, bounce. Okay, that looks a lot better. Okay, so we've got him to bounce, and he only bounces when the trampoline is under him. But if the trampoline's not there, he just kind of goes through the ground. So we need to say, here we're saying if he hits the trampoline, then make him bounce. Otherwise, which we'll use an else statement, what should happen? Well, 2 things. We need to show, we're going to lose a life, which we haven't done anything about yet. To do, lose a life, and then we're going to throw a new baby out the window. So I'm going to show one little trick here. We already have some code to throw a new baby, and it happens here when the baby goes past the right side of the screen, which is when he gets to safety. So this code basically resets the baby and throws a new one out the window. So we'll select this, and we're going to do basically what we did when we made variables, but we're going to not extract a variable or a field. We're going to extract what's called a method, which can have code in it. So I'm going to select this line, or these 3 lines, right-click, and go to Refactor, Extract, and method is what you want. You can also see the keyboard shortcut, Command-Option-M for method. And we need to give it a name. I'll call it Toss New Baby. And you can see it collapsed all that code to Toss New Baby. And if I look through my file, I'll see it made this method called Toss New Baby that has my code in it. So what's nice about this is, just like when you use a variable, you only have to update it in one place and then everywhere else gets the changes. It's the same thing here. If I am tossing a new baby in multiple places, and I want to change what happens when a baby gets tossed, like say I want to add a sound effect or something, now I can just add it inside this method, and everywhere that uses this will get the change automatically without me having to go into every single place throughout my code and make a change there. So, going back to our trampoline stuff, we're saying if he hits the trampoline, he's going to bounce. Otherwise, we'll lose a life, which we'll do later, and we're going to toss a new baby. So let's see how it works. Yep. So every time he hits, we get a new one, and if we bounce, he bounces. If he hits the ground, we just toss another one out. Okay, that's pretty good. So it's getting close to the end of the episode. There are a few things that I had left, so I think I might do a continuation of this next week. But in the meantime, let me show you one more thing, which is how to switch in some graphics for each of these pieces. I'm just going to do the baby for now, but it's the same approach you can use for the ambulance or for the firemen or for the trampoline. So, here's what we need to do. We're drawing a rectangle for the baby, and the size is 25 by 25. So we need to get an image that's 25 by 25. I use a website for a lot of my little fun games, which is called Open Clip Art, and it's nice because all the artwork on there is either free or it's Creative Commons licensed, which means you can use it in your own projects. Generally, you just have to give attribution to the person who created the artwork. Safari's kind of slow, so I will just put the link up later. Oh, here it goes. openclipart.org. And while that's loading, let me go ahead and show some of the images I found. We've got anonymous baby, a building, a penguin baby, ambulance, some flames, the Leaning Tower of Pisa, big baby, a baby girl, some firemen. So that's all stuff from Open Clip Art. So you can go on there and find your own stuff, or if you're an artist, you can draw your own images, or have your friends draw some images for you if they're artists. So let's use the baby boy sitting. And I guess while preview is opening up, I'll check the chat room. Hi, Jade Ross. Yes, we're doing some simple games using Java. Okay, so here's the baby. So we need him to be 25 pixels by 25 pixels. My computer's getting slower and slower. I'm not sure what's going on. I'm hearing the sound cut out from time to time, so hopefully I can get through this. I'm not sure what a good program on Windows is to edit images, but you can use Preview on the Mac. Go to Tools, Adjust Size, and I want him to be 25 pixels. And his height, let's make his height be 25, and then he'll be 18 pixels wide. Okay. Alright, a tiny little baby. And then I'll save this as... let's see, in my home folder, there's a folder called Idea Projects, Bouncing Babies, Source, Main, and this needs to go in the resource folder. And I'll call this baby.png. Oscar suggests getpaint.net for editing images on Windows. And Jade Ross asks what platform. So this is using Java. So you can run and build this on Mac or Windows or Linux. In the future, I'm going to be doing some Android and maybe even some iPhone programming tutorials also, which will basically use a lot of these same patterns for how to draw graphics and how to hook up event listeners. So it'll use some different specific code, but the same patterns and techniques will apply to that. Okay, so now that we've got, let's see, in our resources, now we've got our baby.png. And if you remember from the Scary Maze game episode for Halloween, we loaded some images. And we did that by making a variable up here, image, baby image equals image.io dot read get class dot get resource, and then the name of the file. Again, kind of just some boilerplate that you need to remember or print out on a cheat sheet. And the file name is baby.png, and then I need a semicolon at the end. And then for images, we have this problem of exceptions. So use Alt-Enter, and we've got to do two steps. We've got to do this move initializer to constructor, which creates this special little method called a constructor where it loads our images. And then we use Alt-Enter again, add the exception, and then it has a problem here down in our main. Use the same thing, Alt-Enter, and do add exception. And now we've had our baby image loaded. So let's use that for drawing the baby instead of drawing the rectangle. So here's our rectangle. I'll comment that out and delete that in a second. Instead of drawing a rectangle, we're going to say g.drawImage, and then the image variable, which for us is baby image, and then an x and y position, which we have baby x, baby y, and then that's it. It already knows the width and height because of the size of the image. We need to say null at the end just because that's how draw image works. And then we've got this same thing about doubles that we talked about earlier. So just use Alt-Enter and say cast to int to convert the double to an int. And now that we've got that, I'm going to delete the rectangle part. Let's see how it looks. And yeah, my computer is slower and slower every time. I guess I need to make these episodes shorter. And alright, there's the game, and there's the little baby image. So, you can use that same technique. We don't have any more time today, but the firemen and the ambulance and the building or anything else that you want to replace, you can use the same thing. You should make the image be the right size, the same size as the rectangle. There are ways you can make your code resize it for you, but is more complicated, and it's slower too because it's got to resize every time it draws. So it's better just to resize your images in your image editing program, and then there's no problem. All right, so that's it for today. We didn't have time to add the flames or the other images or sounds, so I haven't quite decided. I might do a continuation of this next week, and I also had a request for a side-scrolling game, so I'm going to be working on setting up a good project for that. If I get that done in time, I might do that next week. And if there's any other types of games you guys want to see, or especially if any of you guys are artists or musicians or anything and have some graphics that you'd like to see used in a game, then send that to me. You can email me at aaron@buildsomethingawesome.org. And yes, to answer the question, I do have a YouTube channel. The easiest way to find it is go to my website, buildsomethingawesome.org/archives.html. And I've got all my previous episodes posted on there. This week is the third one, but all the archived episodes are on YouTube, so you can find the YouTube channel from there. And I guess that's about it. If I'll stay online if you guys have any questions, and if anybody is watching who is not in the chat yet, I'll be online for a few more minutes, or probably 15 minutes or so. So if you aren't on the chat yet, you have a chance to sign up for it. You have to create an account to get onto the chat. So thanks for tuning in, and I hope to see you next time. If you make any cool games or have ideas for cool games, please send me an email and let me know what you're up to. So thanks.